YouTube stream and the Twitch stream open. That should be going any second now. And then we should have the debate here in a minute and 34 seconds. Yeah, Pence. I don't. Inside Sigma said Pence betrayed us. I don't know. What did he do? How did he betray anybody? He literally did nothing, which was his job. His job is to do nothing. The vice president's job, theoretically, is to make sure that you are up on what's happening in case the president dies. That's it. Like, or if he gets really sick, you know. I suspect it was a right winger that thinks that Pence was supposed to end the ballot counting or the he was supposed to step in on January 6th. And yeah, Mac, we're live on Tuesday. It's debate night. It's debate night. We got to do it. Oh, man.
This is going to be fun.
We've got some people in the queue. If you guys want to join and add some comments to the live debate, you're welcome to do it. We've got room for a couple, but we are just talking with friends. We're not debating tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Justin.
Hey, good to see you, Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan.
Awesome. Hey, I had a question for you.
Sure.
I'm just kind of like curious. I guess one of the biggest things I went through, kind of a big worry, like kind of a Russian scare the last like a few years back, and I got so worried about a nuclear war. And I'm just wondering, like, what do you think if Trump did get elected president? Do you think that's going to significantly raise the chances of a possible World War III? And what do you think that would look like?
No, I don't think so. I think if Trump gets elected, he'll do what Putin wants him to, and I think that would actually, probably lessen Putin's drive to enter into more war with or escalation with the U.S. Because if he pisses off Trump, he's got no more allies. That's it. That's all he's got. So
Right.
I think he kind of has to keep Trump a little bit happy. He's definitely not afraid of Trump. But he knows I think Putin is actually pretty smart. I think Putin knows that sometimes it pays to have friends in high places. And I think he'll schmooze and compliment Trump and butter him up and try to get Trump to do his bidding. So I think we're going now, guys. We're going. Is the audio okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's great.
Oops. Sorry, guys.
Good. I'm doing my job right.
advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to
It's not
get
true.
to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people.
Wait, so I don't know for anyone who was around during the Iran peace deal. We're going to get back to this in a second, but we actually had an agreement in ink to monitor their actual electrical controls to know what was happening inside of their facilities. At a 24-hour notice, we can get an actual inspector there too. And as it turns out, I have designed centrifuges. I know what goes into making a centrifuge. And I looked at the agreement. If we had kept that agreement, America would have had access to all of the data that was necessary for those centrifuges to operate. And Trump threw it all away. We could have known everything about their uranium enrichment, every single thing about it. Yet he threw it away because he's an idiot. He didn't read it. It's crazy.
People are dead.
That's insane.
Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science.
Our life might get taken down.
Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to restore as much American manufacturing as
reported
possible,
or something.
and you'd want to produce as
Says it's
much
about to be
energy
suspended.
as possible in the United States.
Apparently, we're not allowed to stream
we're
it.
the cleanest economy in the entire world.
Please, we're not the only ones.
Actually led to more energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts.
We can't be
of
the only
entire
ones,
world. When I say that, I mean
doing a stream
the
on
amount of
this.
carbon
I'm
emissions
sure there's
they're doing
hundreds
per
of them
unit
right now.
Economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air
We'll see
and
what
cleaner
happens.
water, the best thing to do is to double down.
Someone
and
was
invest
saying that
in
we should
American
talk
workers
over it
and the
more?
American people. And
Maybe,
unfortunately,
yeah,
Kamala
I
Harris
mean,
has done exactly the opposite.
If we obfuscate
Governor
the
Walz,
audio,
you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as
yeah.
co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship; they work together to. So
Remember
all the
when
governors and the
Trump was in
emergency
office and
responders
he
on the
didn't
ground,
want to
those
give
happen on the front end.
FEMA money to
federal
the
government comes
hurricane
in, make
relief?
sure they're there to that we recover. But
He
we're
only-
still in
I sure
that phase
do.
where
He only
we need
wanted to
make
give it
sure
to the
that
red
they're
states?
Staying there, staying focused.
Yep.
Now, look, coming back
Does
to the
JD
climate
think
change
that
issue,
we're
there's no
all,
doubt
like,
this
we have
thing roared
amnesia?
onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen.
Apparently so.
Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts.
Apparently, there's a thing in the TOS about
adapting, and this has allowed them to tell
streaming
me,
media.
look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybeans, and I harvest
Stupid.
wind. We are
I
producing
know.
more natural gas
a
and
public-
more oil
We're gonna
than
write it
we've
out.
ever had.
Yeah, it's a public
We're also
debate. I'm gonna write it
producing
out till they
more
shut me
clean
down.
energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward.
As
that
you
climate
should.
change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon.
Apparently, he doesn't know how energy works either.
I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America.
What the
Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in
And
China.
Ohio, we're making them
especially
here in
the
Ohio
components
too. We've got
that
a
go into those
huge
panels.
solar
So if
plant
you
here.
really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it.
No,
Kamala
no, we
Harris has
don't.
done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing.
Senator,
I hope they have a fact checker,
Governor,
because
would you
what
like to
the
respond?
fuck?
Well, look,
Lies
we're producing
on
more
lies.
natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate
Mic
is
drop.
warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration.
We're also
The
exporting
crisis
more
at the
oil
US
right now than
Mexico
any
border
time in history
consistently
ever.
ranks as one of the top issues.
And that's
for
under
American
whose
voters.
rule?
Senator Vance, your campaign
Trump's
is
before
pledging
he
to carry
left.
out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies.
Yet she didn't.
94 executive orders suspending deportations.
Donald did that himself,
decriminalizing
princess.
Illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance.
Is he just
because
gonna use
Kamala
his
Harris
mother
let
for
in fentanyl
everything?
into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding.
It's actually
My mother
US
funded
citizen.
World War
Border
II.
policies, build the wall,
Actually,
limit
US citizen.
deportations, and that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 20, 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work.
Oh,
And the final point, Margaret, you
please.
asked about family separation.
Guys that look like
now,
me-
42% of you guys are lazy.
320,000 children that the
Guys that
Department
look
of
like me are
Homeland
not
Security has
volunteering to do
effectively
roofing
lost.
jobs
Some of them have
or
been sex
to
trafficked.
do
Some of them
farm
hopefully
work.
are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug
Exactly.
trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Trump literally hires
Governor,
undocumented
Do you
immigrants
care to
and then
respond
doesn't
to
pay
any of the
them.
specific allegations, including that
All
the
the
vice
time.
president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And
same with the
Chamber of Commerce and Wall
receipts.
Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents. Detection for drugs. DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2%
That
of
worked
that
out
wall
well.
got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again,
Worked out
9
so well.
years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time
Vance is
is
like, oh,
up.
don't use my words
Senator,
against
the
me.
question was, will you separate parents from their children, even
We do
if
like
their
to do
kids
that.
are U.S. citizens?
Yeah, Vance
1
ran
minute.
from that question
Margaret,
hard.
My point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to
Don't cook him too hard, Tim.
Hey guys,
I
the
believe
pets
Senator
in
Vance
Springfield
wants to
are on
solve
meth.
this, but by
The
standing
pets
with
in
Donald
Springfield
They're
are
eating
and not
the
working together
cats.
to find a
They're
solution,
eating
it
the
becomes a
dogs.
talking point. And
They're
when it becomes a
fentanyl-laced
talking point
cats
like this,
being eaten in
we
Springfield.
dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
I bet that tastes great.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris is
Yeah, says that they don't have enough
because the Border
power.
Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans.
No, it's because you're
The people that I'm most worried about in
underpaying
Springfield,
your
Ohio,
workers.
are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border.
They know their
It is a
worth.
disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute.
Lives
to respond.
destroyed.
It is law enforcement that asked
Yep.
for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot.
Yeah, that 7
Matthew
years can
25:40
hurt a
talks about,
lot.
to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for
Big
our
win.
viewers,
Talking scripture was
Ohio
boss.
does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status. Nora?
Margaret, but
Thank you.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
Thank you,
I think it's
Nora.
important
We're
because
gonna turn now to the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the
Vance
rules
really
were
wants
that
to
you
respond.
fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually
Trump did the
going
same
on.
thing. No, we
So there's
can't
an
move on. You
application
have to
called
let
the
you have to
CBP
let me
One app,
respond, even
where
though
you
it's
can
not
go
my
on
turn.
As an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for
But I thought he
parole
was a never
and be
Trump
granted
guy.
legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal
Yes,
immigration.
thank you. That's
Margaret,
enough, Senator.
by
Thank
our
you,
own-
Senator.
Okay, be
Two
quiet.
peas
We
in a fucking
know
pod.
you don't like women.
So much to
Opened
get
up
to,
that
Senator.
pathway.
We
Those
have
laws
so
have been on
much.
the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We
CBP
want to have.
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that
They go together like fentanyl and cats.
Yeah, we got a super chat from Milcom said the Republican Party is a terrorist organization. I agree, it is. Also, is anyone else hearing an echo from the panelists? Every time when the panelists talk, I hear an echo. Let me know. Throw a 1 in the chat if it echoes whenever the panel talks. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of yeses.
myself echo.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's
I'm
happening.
echoing.
Okay, all right.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora?
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you.
The fact checking
How do you
is
pay
hot
for all
tonight.
that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing
don't put
higher
F1
by
in
about
chat.
60%.
It does
Open the
not
American
work.
southern border and make
It'll actually
middle
flag the
class
lifer
life
spam.
unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust.
I love how JD
her
thinks
actual
that
plans.
Kamala's the
Now,
president.
Donald Trump's economic plan
Right?
is not just a plan, but
She's
it's
not the
also
president.
a record. A lot of those same
I like
economists
it.
attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a
tax
lot
the
of those
rich.
resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom boom, unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle
Trump
class?
said you could put
Kamala
bleach in
Harris's
your
day
body.
one
He
was
has no
Donald
common
Trump's
sense.
failure on COVID that led to
Let's
the
not
collapse of
forget
our
how
economy.
he
We were
gave the
already
Puerto
before
Rican
COVID
people
in a
paper
manufacturing
towels
recession.
after
2
a
million people out of
hurricane
work, the largest
disaster.
percentage since the Great Depression.
He also
9 million jobs
started a
lost on
trade war that
That was day
bankrupted
one.
farmers.
Whether it was the
Yeah.
Infrastructure Act or other things, we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo
That's a
Clinic in
good one,
Rochester,
Sean.
Minnesota,
What
not
about
Donald Trump. And the
2025?
same thing
Project
goes with this. And I
2025.
ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever.
They'll deny it.
How is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's
Get
wrong with the
him,
system.
Tim.
There's a way
And
around
facts,
it, and he's
Jonathan,
bragged
facts.
about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that.
No, that
They said
actually
if
did
we
happen.
shipped our industrial base
That's literally
off to
what
other
happened.
countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant,
This costs twice as much to
productive
make in the
our own
States.
nation, that it would somehow make us better off. And they
Yes,
were wrong
it does,
about
and it's
that. And for the
actually
first time in
surprisingly a
generation,
lot
Donald Trump
cheaper
had the wisdom
overseas.
and the courage
Yeah.
to say to that bipartisan
And those bills
consensus,
were right-wing
we're
bills, not
doing it
left-wing bills
anymore.
anyways.
We're
It's
bringing
dumb.
American manufacturing back. We're
Listen,
unleashing
I have my
American
eyes on
energy.
the pink
We're going
one,
to make
though.
more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home.
The original
7, 4,
NAFTA
and
bill
2,
was
and I love them
pioneered
very
by
much, and I
George
hope
Bush
they're in bed
number
right
one.
now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the
Senior?
bodies of our children are manufactured by
That's how he
nations
goes
that
by,
hate us.
Senior?
This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
If you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said,
I'm
first of
staying
all,
on
Donald
point.
Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a
show
gross
that
generalization.
he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did.
He didn't.
And then you simultaneously
Inflation
got to defend
ballooned.
Kamala Harris's atrocious economic
He's on
record,
his
which has
knees
made
for Daddy
gas,
Trump.
groceries and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's
The
like.
pity me
to
stories
not
are
be able to
endless with
afford
him.
the things that you need to afford.
Yeah,
we can do so
typical.
much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense.
Someone keep
economic
tabs on the
principles.
mommy
We have a
issues tonight,
conversation
shall
on
we?
Healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy? You have 2
Yeah,
minutes.
well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12
Realism,
years.
love to see
and in
it.
Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric.
We have a new
but
slogan,
being
Justin.
there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
Just all I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China
Balls to
during
balls.
the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
This will be interesting.
I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular here, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're not probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the
What
one
the
issue,
fuck?
the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages
Republican
of American
states are
workers
trying to
unless our
legalize
country
child
stands
labor.
up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights.
Wow.
After Roe versus Wade was overturned,
We all
you
heard
signed
that,
a
right?
bill
Like, we
into
all-
law that made Minnesota
Just wanna
one
make
of
sure
the
we're on the
least
same
restrictive
timeline.
states in the
I
nation
heard
when
that.
it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific.
TikTok going to take us down now.
my
About that,
fuck.
Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right.
TikTok Shop is
in this.
amazing. You
So
can
in
get signed
Minnesota,
books from
what we
TikTok
did
Shop.
was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business.
A lot of
but
people.
Those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is
Speak on
well,
it,
the
Ken.
states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually.
I wonder
very
if
dear
this
to
is
me.
like Romney's
She's watching
Binders of Women.
tonight, and I love you. And she told me
Oh
something a couple
my
years
God,
ago that
Jeff.
she felt like if she hadn't had that
Definitely the
abortion,
Binders of Women,
that it
yeah.
would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take
J.D.
from that
Vance
as a
definitely got
Republican
Binders
who
of Women.
proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments.
You guys
I
are
want us to
not
make it
pro-family.
easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home. So they
There's
can afford
women
a
who
place
don't want to have
raise that
babies, and
family.
you're
I think there's
forcing
so
them
much that we can
to.
do on the
Read
public
the
policy
room,
front
dude.
just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy
Hey,
as
Edward,
democracy
maybe if you guys
sometimes
learn
is,
to keep
is
your
to
pee-pee
let
out of
voters
women,
make these
even
decisions, let the individual
unconsensually,
states make their
we
abortion
wouldn't have
policy. And I think that's what
unwanted
makes the most
children.
sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have
We also
supported
had another
a federal
victim who
ban
had
on abortion
atomic
after
pregnancy,
15 weeks.
kissed
In
her
fact,
son
you said
goodbye
if
and
someone
never
can't
went
support
home
legislation like
because
that,
it exploded.
quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never
Before they
supported
move
a
on to the next topic, I want to put the data on the screen real quick.
national ban. I did during when I was running for Senate in 2022.
For what Vance has said, I'm going to put it right here underneath the debate. It shows the maternal mortality rate by state after Roe Wade.
To talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real
There
leadership
are
is.
women whose
Governor,
bodies
response.
cannot
I'm gonna
handle
respond on the pro-abortion
pregnancy.
piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally
he's just lying.
barbaric. And that's why I use
not
that
true.
word.
Lying
Nora,
out
is
his
because
ass.
some of what
They've
we've
been
seen-
saying that
do you wanna
since the
force
Obama
Catholic
admin. It's
hospitals
never
to
been
perform
true.
abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris is supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and
true.
make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But
JD
please,
is doing the Trump
but
tactic
Governor,
where if
please
you just
respond.
lie
Look, this is
and
one
hope
where
you don't
there's
get
always
fact
something there.
checked,
This
maybe
is a
you
very
won't.
simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
what was I wrong
This
about,
was-
Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate.
Princess
But the point
getting
on this
spicy all
there's
of a sudden.
continuation of these guys.
You better not
to
cry, his
try and
eyeliner's
tell
gonna
women or
run.
to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
He literally answered
There's a
you.
lot to discuss.
You
We
weren't
have to move
listening.
on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in
Holy
just a moment.
shit. You know,
So I thought the abortion debate would get spicy because, I mean, it's a hot button issue right now. I
it
was
is.
really hoping they would drag religion into it, but they're not going to. They're going to keep that hot button issue off the table, I would imagine. But yeah, because Waltz is religious too, right? Isn't he? Is he Catholic, or what's his situation? Let me check. Let's
I have
see.
no idea.
Tim Waltz religion.
Yeah. People are saying yes.
Yeah, he's Catholic. Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's like they always have this characterization of like, oh, you Democrats are, you're all atheists, and you just want to unalive babies because you don't have morals. But the majority, almost all of the Democrats I've ever met were Christian somehow, or they were part of another faith tradition. Very few of them in politics are actually non-religious. In fact, I can't even name one off the top of my head. Can anyone name an atheist politician in any party right now?
No.
I mean, I'm sure they exist. I don't know who they are, though.
Meg said Hanji and Justin for president.
we will tear those debates wide open.
Oh my gods, we would. We so would.
I'd vote for you.
I appreciate that. There's a couple people that said Obama wasn't religious, and you're right. He was. I wouldn't say Obama was quasi-religious. The church that he went to it is a Christian church. They believe in like a communal theology. What was the name of his church? It was a very famous pastor that preached collectivist salvation. Was it Jeremy Wright? I think that was his pastor.
Someone said Obama was agnostic, I think, but I don't know.
He was. The only atheist politician I can think of is Jesse Ventura, but I do have to say,
I love Jesse Ventura.
if you talk around like atheist communities in general, they'll tell you that a lot of politicians who are atheists prefer to identify as something because it's just difficult to get elected as an atheist,
It is hard.
or they don't talk about it at all.
And it came to me now. The theology that Obama and his pastor got in a lot of trouble for is called liberation theology. It says, this behavior is not in line with our policies. Gifting is suspended in this live. Reason, reproduce content. That's fine. We got another warning. So, guys, you can't give gifts during this live because apparently you're not allowed to do it if you're streaming the debate. Whatever. I'm surprised we haven't gotten taken down completely already.
Don't jinx it. But I mean, if you guys still want to, show us love and support, we do have link trees. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yeah,
TikTok Shop is amazing.
YouTube super chats still work. Also, over on YouTube, someone came with an absolutely fire comment saying that Tim looks like Don Rickles, and I agree. Tim there's no way he's not related to Don Rickles. He's got to be. He just has to be. Let me see. I'm gonna get a picture of him. You guys know the old comedian Don Rickles? Here he is. Oh, you guys are gonna die. Just look at this. All right, I want to put it on the screen real quick. Oh, stupid pop-up. Why you do that? There we go.
Oh my God, he does. He does.
So Don Rickles, absolutely. Let me get him actually on the screen here. I kind of got him cut off. There we go. Listen, guys, if that's not Tim Walz,
that's crazy.
You cannot convince me. You cannot convince me that Don Rickles is not related. Yeah, thank you, Milcom, for the $10 super chat. I really appreciate that. I'll get the live audio back up.
We want to turn now to America's gun
I want to
violence
wait for him to come back up.
The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles.
They don't just look alike. He's a reincarnated Don Rickles.
For the first
time, they're
the
twins.
Parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings?
Don't you start that.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff.
JB's
and
hiding
we do
in
have
the
to do better.
closet.
And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns
look at their lips. They're even got the same lip action
than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately
That's every
think
school
that we
in
have
America
to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers.
We can't have less guns. We have to have every school maximum security.
Out of the hands of bad guys.
What the fuck? Talk about a military. You know what?
We've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think
over to you, Don.
Watching
These
tonight,
people are
this
unreal.
Is this your biggest nightmare? Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility
firearms have insurance on them.
In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference.
We're
have
the
to.
only
If you're
country
listening
with
tonight,
maximum
this
security
breaks your heart.
schools. The only
Senator?
one.
Tim, first
Yeah.
of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting, and I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you saying
okay.
so.
Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what
There
Tim
it
said
is.
actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates
Christ
some
have
of the,
mercy.
frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do.
Maybe
think that we
because our
need to
kids
get
are getting
to
shot
the
at
root causes
school.
of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a
Hello,
bad gun violence
trauma.
problem.
You guys aren't
but I do
doing
think it's a big piece of
nothing.
it. Another
Taking kids
driver
away
of the
from
gun
parents
violence
who
epidemic,
actually haven't
especially
done
that
anything
affecting our
wrong
kids, it
versus
doesn't
people
earn as
who
many
do
headlines,
not
but
deserve
is
to
the
have
terrible
children.
gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities.
The
And this
prevalence
is
of
why we
mental
have to
health in
empower
other
law
countries
enforcement
like
to arrest
UK
the
and
bad guys,
Australia
put them away,
is the
and
same
take
as
gun
here.
offenders
They have
off
a
the
fraction
streets.
of our
I think
live
there's a
rate
whole
per
host of
capita.
things that we can do here,
Wow.
but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we
This
should
is for
look at all of
educational
the
purposes,
issues.
TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok's
Making
going to
sure
take us
folks have
down.
healthcare and
We've
all
got
that, but I wanna
drugs,
be
we've
very
got
careful.
guns.
This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat.
That's a good point.
Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost
Oh, this
of
is going to be
housing
hot.
and rent.
This is going to be fire right
There's a
now.
shortage of more than 4 million
Where's
homes in
my
the United
popcorn?
States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the
Fact of
Harris
the matter is
campaign
nobody's
promises a
actually responsible for the
$25,000
inflation.
down payment assistance for first-time
Nope.
home buyers
Inflation
and
happened
a
globally,
$10,000 tax
globally,
credit.
all at the
They
same
also
time.
promise to build
It's from the
3 million
pandemic.
new homes.
And the
Where are you
strike
building these
in the
homes,
courts is
and won't
not
handing out that kind of
helping.
money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your
Yeah.
campaign's position, the promise is
To the point that was raised earlier, a huge portion of all new home sales didn't go to individuals. It went to investment firms. And that's one of the things that's driving up the home prices right now.
to seize federal lands to
Oh, sorry about that.
build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country,
bill.
which does.
It's always the immigrants.
25 million
It's always
illegal
the immigrants, and it's always
Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant
Holy
drivers
shit.
of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices.
I can't wait for him
that
to talk
have
about the
happened
pets
right
getting eaten,
alongside
and you know it's coming
massive
up.
increases in illegal alien
Listen.
populations under Kamala Harris.
You know, I'm gonna leave that spicy comment to myself. Guys, fair reminder, F1s do not work in chat, and do not gift the live, because if you do that, it is going to mess up the live stream. Justin will get taken down. If you want to gift anyone on the panel, we have our link trees in our bios with our Cash Apps, our Venmos, and our Amazon wish list. Do it that way so that way we can keep the live stream going. Thank you.
Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her.
She's
not
not
sit around
the
and campaign
president,
and do nothing
Vance.
while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for
That's right,
American
Rock. We would
citizens
not have
if
vegetables
you
without
lowered
undocumented
energy
workers.
prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief.
We're producing
for
more
American
gas now
citizens,
than any
not,
time in
by the way,
history,
just in
ever.
housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah, Governor,
It's
we will
owned
get
by
to you in a
private
moment.
companies.
Where are you going to
It's
seize the
owned
federal
by
lands? Can you
private
clarify?
companies. We can't
Well,
tell them
Donald
to
Trump
lower
says we have a
prices.
lot of
It's
federal
their
lands that aren't being
decision.
used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up.
Seriously?
Governor, I do want to let you respond to the
Wait.
allegation
He said the
that
quiet
the vice
part out
president
loud.
is
Make sure I heard it. Did he just say that illegal immigrants are competing to buy houses on the market, and that's why prices are so high? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, we know all about the
Yes.
undocumented migrants with mortgages.
Okay, just
Yeah.
that's I
Yeah.
don't know if you know that, but you can't get a mortgage as an This is crazy.
letting in
Of course, that's not
migrants,
true. And again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up.
immigrants
But
ones.
Senator, on
Those
that
ones.
point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers.
The regulatory
We increasingly
regime?
have a
What
federal administration
regulations?
that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes.
They're throwing home
Actually,
builders
agree
in
with Tim
jail?
Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
That's the question.
You can very quickly reply.
That's the one.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor.
Which
and
regulation?
I don't necessarily disagree with that. That in some cases, many of those are local. Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about
Vance
the
got caught in a
housing
lie.
crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In
Republicans
response,
have
he
no
said,
health care plan.
"I have
Nothing. You
concepts
die in
of
the
a plan."
streets.
Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions?
Oh, they do have
won't
concepts of
pay
plans, though.
more?
They've
I'll
got
get into next.
concepts of
Well,
plans.
of course, we're going to cover Americans with
Well,
pre-existing
he's not
conditions. In fact, a
president
lot of my
yet.
family members have gotten health care.
You have to. It's already in place.
You know, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, you know, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage.
Give it.
It would bore everybody to
5
tears,
points.
And it wouldn't actually
5
mean
points from the
anything
plan.
because
What is
part
it?
of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now,
There's
when
no
Donald
plan.
Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down
That was
costs.
passed and
we talked
pioneered
about,
at the end of his
the reinsurance
presidency
regulations
by
is what I was
a
talking about.
liberal
Donald
blue
Trump has
Congress.
said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously
Good
until Donald
argument.
Trump
I
came
heard that.
along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's
In
not
what
perfect, of
way?
course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I
empty
think that
platitudes.
Donald Trump has earned the right to put
He's
in
just
place
a
some better health care policies. He's earned
ball.
it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being
A lot of words
I
not saying anything.
I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would
Damn,
protect
Penn
people with
is on
pre-existing
point
conditions or
tonight.
laid out that plan.
Well, look, we
There's no
currently
plan.
have laws and
There
regulations
is no
in place right now that protect people with pre-existing
Get
conditions.
rid of insurance
We wanna keep
companies.
those regulations in place.
Get rid
but
of the
we also
insurance
wanna make the health
companies.
insurance marketplace function a little bit better.
We
Now, what
need-
Governor
we need a
Walz just
public
said
option.
Is actually
Go to
not
single
true.
payer.
A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight
I
is
agree
that a
with
lot
that
of
so
young,
much,
healthy people
Justin.
were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low, take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern.
Yeah,
in a
Jamie, he's not
bipartisan way
answering.
and get
He's
results,
running.
not just complain about problems.
He's running
but
hard
actually
from the
solve them.
question.
Governor, did enrollment
He's running
in the
faster than
Affordable
Usain
Care Act go
Bolt.
up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now.
He's not
go
going
up.
to
Look,
answer.
people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking
Or-
pre-ACA where we get people out.
Public
Look,
option.
People know
Universal health care for
People
all.
expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can
It's important too to recognize, for those who don't know, the public option, not the public option, the mandate to get the insurance. If you can't afford it, all you have to do on your tax forms is tell them that you couldn't afford it. That's why you didn't have it. And they're never going to track you down. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. They're not coming for you.
continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time.
ahead,
We have a
Nora.
number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns?
Well, that's a
You
good
have 2
one.
minutes.
That's a good one.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress works.
God,
Here's
I
what the
love
deal is.
women.
Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers. We
I
get
got
more
0 days
consistency
off.
in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck, because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a
deserves
national
claps
paid
all
leave
around.
program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I
No,
I speak from
Republicans
this
don't.
very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe
No,
you live in a rural area
absolutely
or an
not.
urban area.
Here
where you'd
we
like to get
fucking
together
go.
with families in your neighborhood to provide
you
child care in
kidding
the way
me?
that makes the most sense.
No,
You don't
child
get
care should
access
not
to
be
any of these
exported to
federal
the
monies.
church.
We want to promote choice in how we deliver
These people are
family care and how
delusional.
we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the
That's
campaign
right,
trail
sign.
a lot the
Tax
past
to
7 or 8
fucking
weeks. And one of
churches.
the biggest complaints I hear
Is
from
that
young
really
families
the
is
safest place
people
to
who
put a
feel
child?
like they don't have options.
No.
Like they're
Statistics say
choosing
fuck
between
no.
going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance,
That's the most
many
absurd
things
thing
about
I've
the
heard.
American family. The Federal Reserve says
crazy.
parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month.
I
So
spend
wanna get
more
your
for mine
thoughts
because
on
I've
this.
got a special needs
President
child.
Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being
In fact, it's
expensive,
4 times as much as my
relatively
mortgage.
speaking, not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in.
Yes.
Is
It's a lot.
President Trump committed to the $5,000
Childcare
per
answer
child
was
tax credit
abject
that you have
nonsense.
described? You have 1 minute.
Not even
Well, what
close to
President
an
Trump
answer.
said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
But for how long?
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
He's got no answers.
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of child care shortages, we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very
That's not
essential
true.
service.
That's not true at all.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket
gotta
also
send
has
our
some
kids
child
to
care
church,
tax credit
okay?
proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of
We have
democracy.
tax
One of the reasons why
For
people that live
Americans
here
after
aren't
the
having
economy
kids is because they
and
can't afford it.
inflation.
We got to
After
make
the
it affordable to have
2020 election,
kids.
President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation,
gonna be fun.
Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable. And that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it.
Kamala's the president,
She's not
guys.
the
the
president.
president.
There were problems in 2020.
What
And my
in
own
the-
belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public
This is
square,
super
and that's
huge
all
pivot.
I've
We've got
said,
a
and that's
pivoting
all that
Perry on
Donald Trump has
stage.
said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years.
It's a threat to democracy.
Especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats.
More stories about how poor you were growing up. Nobody
Jr.
cares.
And Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders.
I don't break bread with Nazis.
They don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue.
Fucking
We don't have to agree on
facts,
every
Jeff.
issue. But we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Funny
I
how
enjoyed tonight's debate. I think
Kamala's
there's a lot of
policies
commonality
caused
here, and I'm
inflation in every
sympathetic
country
in
around the
speaking on
globe.
things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever
We know you're
he wants
not
it.
going to
We
win.
have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance, I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris
Oh, he running.
censor Americans
He
from
running.
speaking their
He won't
mind
answer
and
it.
ignore
He
the 2020
ran so
COVID
fast.
situation?
That is
Has she tried to-
that is a damning non.
Got a running
Actually,
Randall.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You
Because
yourself
you
have
don't
said
practice
there's no First
democracy.
Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the
threatening or
power
hate
of
speech.
government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to
Please.
respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election.
Even
This
if
is
he
not a
uses that
debate.
for
It's
that
not-
anyway.
It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So, America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates, the CBS News Vice Presidential.
Wow.
Him is dog walking Vance right now.
It's been really interesting. I'm a little shocked by the amount of questions that JD has dodged, and I may be a little shocked that Tim is not calling him out on it more. But I listen, when you're in a debate, when you're in the heat of things, there's a lot of things you don't think about.
Yeah, it usually comes to you after the fact. It happens to me sometimes. Like, damn, I should have said that.
Yeah, but I think JD's actually doing better than what I thought he was going to do, because I thought, and I could be wrong, I thought he was going to bring more conspiracy theories out, like the Donald Trump type, because I assumed that him and Donald Trump are like planning some debate strategy, but that was dumb. I don't know why I would think that Donald Trump plans anything. He just shoots from the hip at every given moment of his life. He has no idea what's happening 5 minutes from now.
He kind of did though. Like the answer to every single problem was illegal immigrants. Like I'm surprised he didn't put child care with illegal immigrants.
He stopped short of cats and dogs.
Yeah, like the reason you don't have child care is because illegal immigrants came and took your kids.
Yeah,
Like
I cannot believe
it's
that.
really crazy.
And I cannot believe he
And
blamed
construction
housing
workers,
prices on immigrants. That's unreal.
He's laughing.
Now-
He-
And remember, at the same time, Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, quite literally during his presidency was going overseas and selling property and housing to the highest bidder in order to profit on being the son-in-law of the president, and promising people, if you buy this fictitious property, or it's real property, but if you buy the fictitious deed to this property or the rights to this property, we can guarantee you citizenship. And so people were literally buying land in property in order to get citizenship. They're quite literally purchasing it. And so, like, they're not against illegal immigrants. They just want the rich ones to come here and specifically to give money to them.
That's exactly it. Money talks to these people.
These people are wild. Yeah, Google the Jared Kushner cash for citizenship scandal is wild. I can't believe no one talks about it.
I can't wait for the day to where they bring up. So what are we going to do about churches? Because we know they're multi-million dollar operational systems. What are your plans on taxing them? Let's see what happens.
But we can't tax them because they're going to give us the child care now. Didn't you hear that? The churches are going to chip in to provide child care for everybody because they've done so good elsewhere. We know their record on dealing with children is so good.
So good that they have SAM insurance policies.
Yeah, the same organizations that need insurance for when their leaders touch your children, those are the churches that are going to be in charge of taking care of your needs when you have children. That's not a conflict at all. We need to tax them. Have you guys seen mega churches? Has anyone here been to a mega church? I have. It's unbelievable the amount of money that these churches have.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
And it's all production. It's all a show. We need to tax them. And now I know actually a lot of pastors, because I was in ministry for a long time, who are okay with taxing the churches. They're like, yeah, tax us. We're a business, just do it. It's the filthy, shady guys that don't want to tax the churches. And you could
say it's a business.
Yeah, it's going to be graded. It's not like if you have a little church out in the country that makes no money, and you give like a $500 housing stipend to your pastor every month, and like those churches obviously aren't getting taxed. It's going to be on a graded scale.
That part.
To the CBS News vice presidential debate, it is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built. From Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way.
Yeah.
We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator
Thank
Vance,
you,
your
Tim.
closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights
fuck.
because Ohio gets pretty cold
Just
at night.
endless.
And because money was often very tight.
I'm so
And I
poor
believe,
and blue
as a person who
collar.
wants to
Vote
be
for
your next
me.
vice
That's
president,
all he's got.
that we are a
He's
rich
got no
and
plans.
prosperous enough country
He's only
where
got
every
concepts of
American,
plans.
whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's
The
energy
rich don't
policies.
have a
I
problem
believe that
turning
whether
on
you're
their
rich or
heat.
poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies.
Which
I
one?
believe
Which
that whether you're
policy?
rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a
Kamala
house.
Harris's policies. Oh my
You ought to
God.
not have your communities
Remember,
flooded
guys,
with
she's the
fentanyl,
president.
And that too has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago.
Day
and
one
her
of what?
policies have made these problems worse. Now,
This
I
is
believe that we
Malakia.
have the most
Bro, she's the
beautiful country in
VP.
the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for
Damn,
my family.
Jeff.
What that is
Damn.
telling
Yep.
me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already
Change.
done this.
We had
once
4 years
before
of
and did it
Trump. He
well.
didn't do anything.
Please vote for Donald Trump.
Not
And
a
whether you
damn
vote
thing
for
but
me or
golf.
vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you.
Ew.
And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote.
Register to
Here
vote.
At CBS News. Thank you.
Register to vote,
registered.
guys. If you're not already.
35 days.
Remember, in a lot of states you can vote early too. So I know, like where I live, it's not terrible voting on the November 5th. But still, if you can vote a day or two early, definitely do it. You can get in and out in just a couple minutes.
Remember the 5th of November.
Hey, Justin, have you heard of Mark Driscoll?
Yeah, I know Driscoll.
Yeah, that's my cousin.
Oh dear Lord, that wannabe machismo.
Yeah, that's my cousin.
I've never
So,
seen a
just so you
guy
know.
so insecure and obsessed with trying to be a man.
Oh, trust me.
Well, Vance too, but Mark Driscoll. I've never seen a pastor talk so endlessly about real manhood who clearly is insecure about his own manhood.
Oh, it's so gross.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
That's my family, unfortunately.
Sorry about
I'm
that.
so sorry.
He's probably for that, like those guys that like suntan their sacks.
Yeah, he's definitely doing
Shit.
the anal sunbathing.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
My.
I don't know.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
supposed to be like something to make you more manly. Whatever.
It's not making anyone manly. And this is my favorite picture. I love this picture of Tim Walz. Anyone else see this one yet? This is
Yes.
the difference
Oh, yeah.
between a Republican and Tim Walz right here. I didn't have time to hunt down a picture of Trump with the kids, but it would have been roughly the same. There you go.
Well, and have any of us ever even seen Vance's family? Like I've seen his wife talk like by herself, not with him.
Well,
around.
I mean,
which by the way, she's an immigrant.
but there are
Or she's a child of them.
Stop it right now. She's an immigrant.
She's from the Middle East.
Many-
like India. Or...
they don't have internet. Remember how poor he was? They're all walking around barefoot, high on meth.
Whatever.
Now we have to check though if he does show a picture of his family, we have to check if it's a borrowed family because that's the new.
Oh, for sure.
Well, I mean, it's definitely like a beard family. If you guys know what a beard is.
There is a 1,000,000% chance that Vance thinks that his non-white wife is giving him street cred, and it's not working.
He was quoted a few years ago talking about how he was against the rhetoric of MAGA because of their anti-immigrant like rhetoric, and how he was saying like, oh, that's people that I love, and he was referring to his wife and his kids.
Are
Wow.
is CBS or C-SPAN, are they going to do a post-debate vote like with a live audience like they do sometimes to see who they think won? Because that's what I want to see. I want to see if they have a live audience that they're going to poll.
Oh man, if you pulled the YouTube comments, they would have told you Vance and somehow Trump won.
Well, listen, guys, it's I'm going to get off here. It's almost 11 o'clock where I'm at. But before we do that,
Sounds kinky.
I want to see either a W or a V in the comments to see who won. V for Vance, W for Waltz. I want to see it, guys. YouTube, Twitch, TikTok. Give me a W or a V. I want to see where we're thinking what happened here. I see one V. There's probably a couple Vs in here. A lot of Ws. I think Waltz, the thing that he did really well here is he came off as being very likable and very down to earth, while also, I think, being in touch with facts and reality and not making outlandish claims. And I think that's what you wanted from Waltz.
Yep, that was pretty much my notes right there. Exactly. Like no wild, just blaming a random group of people that was marginalized, much like 1930s Germany.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. It's hard not to like a guy like Walz. It really is.
Right.
I mean,
So-
I would have loved a good Don Rickles bit where he just dressed Vance down, but still, the Walz performance, I think, was great.
It was beautiful. But my next question is, will this interfere with our regular scheduled programming tomorrow?
I don't know. I should be online tomorrow night at the same time. I'm traveling out of state for work, so I if we have to adjust it, we will. But I suspect we'll be fine.
Yeah, it moves so quick. There'll be something else, some major catastrophe or something that'll change everybody's attention. So
Yeah, there always is. Well, guys, thanks
I'm
so
curious.
much. Yeah, Skits is going to be live tomorrow, guys. So if I'm not live, Skits will be, or maybe both of us. But guys, thank you for being here. I had a good time watching with you, and we'll see you soon with the regularly scheduled program debates of cooking people on religion.
see you guys.